I am your host, Ashira Nelson, and this is PBS Western Reserve's Forum 360, where we have a global outlook from a local view. My guest today is Cyan Blackwell. Cyan serves as a policy strategist for the ACLU of Ohio in the Cleveland, Ohio office. In this role, Cyan works with the coalition partners and community stakeholders to advance the mission and policy and agenda with a particular focus on juvenile justice system in Ohio. Hello, Cyan. Thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to join you today. Thanks for having me.
So this is a mouthful. You got a lot going on.
Yes.
So I can't wait to dive into the day-to-day of what you do and kind of what your mission is and how you got involved. So let's start there. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Northeast Ohio.
Okay.
I was a small child, figured out I wanted to be a lawyer. I don't know where it came from, but then I was like, I think this is something I want to do, and I just stuck with it. I really can't tell you why I came up with that. But then when I went to college, I went to Ohio State University, and I studied public policy and sociology, and I was like, okay, actually, I really think I'm interested in like law and policy.
Okay.
So I spent some time in DC interning, and then I went to the Deep South and did some racial justice work down there for 2 years fellowship. And now I'm back in Northeast Ohio, and I wanted to come home and do the work that I was doing in other areas, like in my hometown, and give back in that way. And so I joined the ACLU as a policy strategist, and it was perfect for me because it has policy and law. And I've been working in the juvenile justice space, which has been really rewarding. I did some work in that space during college, and so that's what I'm doing now at the ACLU.
Okay. So would you say, do you feel like it was something in your background that kind of attached you to this, like interest? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think, being a Black woman, seeing people involved in the criminal legal system is one for sure. Seeing family members or friends involved in the criminal legal system, I think definitely influenced me like at an early age, seeing that in my childhood. And I just like have always been a person, like if I don't think something is fair, I'm like, I don't think this is fair. So I think that was also part of it. And I feel like I realized at an early age that like law and policy had power attached to it.
Okay.
And I liked the option for myself to be able to like access that power.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. Can you provide an overview of ACLU's mission?
Yeah, so the ACLU stands for the American Civil Liberties Union.
Okay.
It's a national organization, but they have state affiliates, and Ohio is one of the affiliates. And our mission is to really protect and expand the civil rights and civil liberties that are guaranteed to the American people in our Constitution.
Okay.
And so that ranges from everything from your First Amendment rights to your right to express yourself and be who you are, your right as a woman. And we do try to do this through a racial justice and an intersectional lens, recognizing that people have multiple identities that are at play. And we also use an approach we call integrated advocacy to accomplish this mission, which uses organizing, law, policy, community, communications to really advance people's civil rights. So it's never a dull day at the ACLU. I feel like we're in an era where there's always something that is coming against people and their rights. And what makes the ACLU unique is that they really actually truly believe in everyone's rights. It's not like it right or wrong, whether they agree with you actually fundamentally. They believe in your rights and want to protect
those. So not
those.
if you were wrong, right or wrong.
Yeah, because that's kind of subjective, but the thing that lies in our Constitution is like, what are your constitutional rights? And so you have a constitutional right to say things, even if people don't like them. And I think that is important because we have to be consistent if we're going to say we want people to have equal rights. So,
I like that. Okay. So what are some key civil liberties and civil rights issues that is focused on in Cleveland?
Yeah, so I will say right now, it's Cleveland and statewide. We're in this really big campaign for Ohioans United for Reproductive Rights. So that's a huge campaign that's coming up in November, which would be a ballot initiative for people of the state of Ohio to vote on reproductive freedom. But specifically in Cleveland, Bail reform has been something we've been working on for years, eliminating cash bail, because we know that, how much money you can pay to get out of prison doesn't indicate, your safety. If you can commit the same crime and have a lot of money than someone who's poor and be stuck in jail.
Oh, good point.
And then also, which is the area that I work on, is youth justice, and which is youth who are in the juvenile justice system. I think what makes Cleveland unique is that Cleveland Cuyahoga County, I will say, leads the state in the amount of youth it sends to our youth prisons. It also treats the most youth as adults. So, it's a system called bindovers, and Cuyahoga County binds over more youth than any of the large counties in the state, and over 90% of these youth are Black. So it's so what a bindover is for people who are not familiar with that language.
Please break it down.
A child as young as 14 years old who's committed of a certain crime can be prosecuted as an adult in the state of Ohio.
Wow.
Yes. So, it's not to take away, we know that youth are doing, maybe some behaviors that are harmful, but we know and evidence suggests that it's not helpful to actually treat them as an adult when you look at brain science and so many other factors that come into play. But so those are the big issues in Cleveland. My work is actually really rooted in Cuyahoga County because of those unique issues, especially when it comes to youth.
Wow. Why do you feel that Cuyahoga County has some of the largest numbers in that field?
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely not because the children here are just like the worst of the worst or anything like that.
Nothing odd compared to the other counties
at all. And I think it's just there's multiple factors. It's systemic. It comes into play with our prosecutor, our county prosecutor, how cases are charged, our judges who are elected. And just the overall emphasis in our courts on certain things, it really is we can't identify one actor, but we can identify multiple actors. And so that's why it's important.
Multiple factors that plays into this.
It definitely is. And we need, there's definitely a need for more community supports and diversion programs and alternatives to kids, and recognizing those early factors. We see kids coming from a lot of the same neighborhoods and areas. And then when you look at those areas, there's a lot of disinvestment. There's not a lot of resources. So we have to really look at the full picture. But I think what's driving Cuyahoga County is definitely systemic factors. But I think we as the people can have an impact on our elections and who we choose. And when it comes to prosecutor elections or judges, and know that always the law and order, tough on crime doesn't necessarily always work when it comes to kids. Because kids, consequences and those things change over time, what it means to them. They're really impulsive, they sensation seeking. So they don't always have the best judgment, and we have to recognize that. You have to think about yourself when you were.
Absolutely. I'm thinking, my 14-year-old mind compared to my 34-year-old mind, or the idea that we are treating them as adults. Is crazy.
And it's, if a kid makes a terrible decision, we acknowledge that there needs to be accountability. But we know that the accountability that's in the adult criminal system it doesn't do any good to that child.
I couldn't even imagine how they can survive at 14, 15 in an adult situation.
Absolutely. And we see kids who have been, in the adult system, they experience higher rates of mental and physical abuse. It has detrimental consequences. So that's something that I'm really focused on in Cuyahoga County.
Thank God for your work. Can you share any recent examples or cases that you've been involved with?
Yeah, I think some of the recent causes, so I mentioned bindover. The ACLU has actually been involved in bindover since before I joined. And so that's something I've really been involved with. But something I'm really excited about is that I'm collaborating with different organizations in Cleveland to really develop this collaborative plan for youth justice. And it's really just looking at our juvenile court and our detention center and how we can work with our elected officials. We have a new county executive, we have a young new mayor. We're hoping that we get some new energy that we can kind of really bring in and talk about how we can get resources for kids in the community and how we can think about justice differently when it comes to children. And then also just kind of this whole narrative change piece where we want to really emphasize like these are kids, like we should treat kids as kids.
Yes.
And so that's been a big part of my work. I'm just beginning that, but I've been at the ACLU for a little while now, and I'm really excited to like see that take life and hopefully have some real impact on the people that we're helping. And then something else that I worked on that we've closed was recently there was the budget in the state of Ohio, and so I worked with one of my colleagues at the ACLU and some of our other coalition partners from Policy Matters Ohio to a lot of other organizations to try to get a provision that would have put police officers in schools removed from the budget. And one of the reasons we did that is because that's shown to not increase safety in many cases, and actually directly lead to the school to prison pipeline, where you see Black children who would have ordinarily, be suspended or expelled being then funneled into the legal system. And so that was, we were able to get that provision. We advocated, and it was removed out of the budget. I don't know if we can give direct I guess credit to us, but we made some noise about that, and we had some press conferences, and I think that was a win for us to at least get it out of the budget for now.
Very nice. Yes. For now. Congratulations on being a part of that, because that's big. So
thank you.
Okay, so how does the ACLU collaborate? You talked about it a little bit, but can you go into more of the collaboration that you do with organizations and individuals?
Yeah, I think that's really a unique part of working at the ACLU. I talked a little bit about that integrated advocacy component, and I think that's something that we use internally, but I also think it's how we interact with our partners externally as well. We have our skill set, so we have a very strong communications team, but we see that there are people who may know more about a topic. We work in so many different areas. So we work from everything from youth justice to death penalty to reproductive freedom. So if we're working on let's say a youth justice issue, we may go and work with an organization that only focuses on youth because they have a different level of expertise. We may go and work with someone who's locally based and has more of a grassroots, like works with community members. Because we never want to come into space either with these letters. I always say, like, as a nonprofit, we have these letters that people are like, oh, who are they?
I know, yes.
And take over this space. We really want to help people who are on the ground. And so I think that's another way. But even in that collaborative plan I was talking about, it's really important for us to like work with multiple partners to be able to achieve that, because we just can't do it on our own. And we're a small but mighty group. Like, we're not that big of an organization. So some of my partners that I work with outside of our organization, I probably talk to more regularly than some of my coworkers, just because we're working so closely on that issue. And one of them can bring like their legal expertise, one can bring their research, and like I can bring policy. And so it really works really well in terms of like accomplishing our goals.
Okay. Yeah. So what are the main challenges that you encounter in protecting the civil liberties and civil rights in this region?
Ooh, that's a
lot to unpack.
But I will say one thing in this region, but also in the state of Ohio, is we really deal with a very partisan climate. We're in a very, and sometimes think when you're in this partisan climate, it makes it harder to get things done and push things through that are just fair for everyone.
Okay.
One of the things we see a lot in Ohio, but also in other areas of the country, is partisan gerrymandering, which is basically when a party who's in power draws maps to determine who can vote and like how much voting power a specific area has or district. And so we'll have like these really oddly drawn districts breaking up our state. Like Ohio this was for the United States Congress, but Ohio used to be infamous for the snake on the lake, like this really weird drawn district that just took up this much at the top of the state.
Okay.
And it was just to concentrate like Democratic votes there, and so we deal with that a lot at our state level politics. So we see these supermajority state houses. The ACLU is nonpartisan, so it's not that we need one party in power, but we think it should at least be fair, and that it should at least represent the people who are actually voting, and not concentrating these votes here to work to the disadvantage. So I think that creates a challenging climate in Ohio, and it makes you have to like really pivot to local work, because sometimes you can't necessarily get stuff through in a fair way at the state house because it's not always representative of the voters. So you see these pushes for ballot amendments and for people to just vote on things themselves because citizens want to take things into their own hands now and be able to make decisions instead of being gridlocked.
Yeah. So this is PBS Western Reserve Forum 360. Today, my guest is Cyan Blackwell. She's here to share her work as a policymaker, someone who's super passionate about her work. So Cyan, thank you for being here today. Anything else you want to elaborate on the challenges that we face in this area?
I really think that's a big one. I think in Cuyahoga County as well, we have a challenge of facing maybe when I think about youth justice, it's like misconceptions and like inaccurate headlines. Like we've seen a lot about violence in the media, about youth violence being at an all-time worst. And like when we actually look at the data, that's not supported. Actually, youth violence has been on decline. But you'll never know that because of what you see in the media.
Okay.
And, it creates a feeling of panic, and we should want our communities to be safe. We should want, people to be held accountable. But I think we have to overcome like looking at the facts versus like I don't want to say hysteria, but at least the panic that people are inducing right now. Because it's fair for people to be worried about their communities, but I think in order to make the best decisions moving forward, we need that data and need to be informed by facts.
I wish they will share the positive data
yes.
and balance it out.
Because
we would never know about the good things that are happening because the media focus so much on the bad.
Absolutely. And we've seen some efforts to change it a little bit, but we really have a long way to go with that.
Okay.
Yes.
So how do your organization prioritize cases and issues that they kind of focus on?
So I think we have a board of directors. So I will just say our board of directors really chooses, and signs off, and our executive director, but they really sign off on what direction we're going to go. And I think from what I've learned from being here is that they look at the current climate that we're in. They look at the issues that are coming up. They look at what they feel we need to respond to. And so our involvement in Ohioans for reproductive rights, we are just coming off of last year of Roe versus Wade being overturned and people's reproductive health and rights being up in the air. So, the ACLU is an organization that's known for protecting people's rights. And so I think that comes to the attention of our board or our executive director. Yes. And so they just really, we're in an area right now where I feel like we're being a lot more responsive because there's just so much happening. Yes. So I don't even think we're in an area where we're like selecting this is what you want to work on. It's almost like, I think at some points we do, but at other points it's like, wow, this is a civil rights issue, and how can we as the ACLU not, take a stand on this? And there's just been a lot of that recently. Yes. So we've just been in a lot of spaces.
Okay. Yeah. So in what ways does the ACLU support marginalized and underrepresented groups in our area?
Yeah, so I think like in our mission that we talk about having a racial justice focus and an intersectional lens, and I will be the first to say those are great terms to have, but you really have to like do it. And especially when you think about areas like Cuyahoga County or Northeast Ohio that have such a high population of marginalized and underrepresented groups, I think in a lot of the campaigns we do, that's something we really have to think about. We have to think about how we engage them. And I think we're actively thinking through that. We have a pretty active action team, which is is run by our community organizing team. We have a great community organizer in Northeast Ohio. And she collaborates with local people on the ground, and a lot of these people, she's in the neighborhoods with marginalized, underrepresented groups. And I definitely think the ACLU can utilize more of that. And that's something I'm even looking to incorporate like in my work to make sure that we have like the people that we're talking about included. Because you have these organizations, like I talked about, you have this big name organization, you have these people who are talking about, we need to help these people, we need to help Black and brown youth, but it's like, where are the Black and brown youth voices? Where are the Black and brown people?
You want to help them, but you're not giving them a seat at the table.
Yes, exactly.
How do you truly know their issues and what impacts them?
Absolutely. You can't claim to be the voice of someone when you're not, giving them a voice or empowering them. So I think the ACLU, they pick issues that definitely have affected marginalized groups more, I think, like when we think about bail reform, and they make sure to point out those disparities. Like this is an issue that is a racial justice issue. But I think all organizations, and not the ACLU included, can continue to like really be intentional about that as well.
Okay. So So, how does the ACLU approach advocacy and education to raise awareness to different issues?
So I talked about the integrated advocacy approach, and we use the community organizing. When I was talking about the action team, they're on the ground. Like they're the people that are at events. They are going and having meetings with local leaders if necessary. Like they're amazing. And then we have our communications team, which is really great. We are on Facebook. We're on social media. TikTok.
Really?
And we make like informational TikToks and things that work. So we try to reach every audience. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and I think that is like one way that we get people involved.
Yes, speak their language. Actually be where they are.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think there was some hesitancy among us, like, do you want to be on TikTok? And it was like, we have to be on TikTok.
Right. And especially if, one of the areas you guys are focusing on is juveniles.
Yes.
Juveniles are on TikTok.
Exactly.
So,
and young adults, everyone's on TikTok. So I think that's been really interesting to see. And I think it's really, you have a little more time to actually share stuff on there in an interactive way. You can make a video and you can have all the effects. And so our comms team is great with that as well.
That's amazing. That's great that you are where your audience is.
Yes.
Like the people, you're actually representing the people.
Yeah. You have to meet people where they are.
Yes,
exactly.
I love that. Meeting people where they are.
Yes.
So are there any unique challenges or opportunities in protecting civil liberties in Ohio? So any unique issues that's in Ohio compared to other states that we're only facing?
Yeah, I think so. I would love to say it's unique to Ohio. Sometimes it feels like it's unique to Ohio because we're here and we're experiencing in real time and we are feeling the weight of these decisions. But it does seem to not be limited to Ohio.
Okay. And we need to hear that. Just like we need to hear the positive things that numbers are actually decreasing in crime.
Yes, in terms of youth crime, it definitely are. And I think in Ohio, all eyes are on Ohio right now, I will say, when it comes to this ballot amendment and it's ballot initiative that'll be on the ballot in November next month.
Okay.
And all eyes are on Ohio because reproductive rights and reproductive freedom is just really something that I think people want to know if they have a chance to do that in other states, So I do think Ohio is unique in that way that, back in August, there was an attempt to kind of stop the reproductive rights ballot initiative with the issue 1 that people were voting on. And that was unique to Ohio because we had seen people say that we were no longer going to do August elections in this state because they were too expensive. But when they realized that, that campaign was coming up, it quickly changed course. And then we had an August election. But the Ohio people were very clear that they did not, very clear on their stance, and that they do want the option to be able to amend their constitution. And that should be something that they have as an option. And so that was defeated, and now we're heading into November. But that was something that diverted money and time and attention away from the fight, and that was really unique in Ohio. And it was the nation was paying attention to that. It was in New York Times. So that was unique, and we had a blatant attempt by lawmakers to kind of stop Ohioans from getting a say on what's going to be on the ballot in November. Wow. Yes.
Okay, so what strategies does the ACLU employ to address issues related to police accountability?
Yeah, I think so. Some of that work was started a few years ago. Back in after the 137 shots case with Timothy Russell Wilson. Yes. That was awful, and the ACLU actually wrote a letter to the Department of Justice to ask for an investigation into the Cleveland Division of Police's behavior. And that led to, and among other activists calling for that, and eventually now, as you know, Cleveland's in a consent decree where they are being monitored by the Department of Justice to make improvements. And so that began a few years ago. And that is something that I think the ACLU has been monitoring over the years. Cleveland's still in the consent decree. That was about 10 years ago when that happened. When the Department of Justice first did that investigation in 2012 when it was open, or 2013, I believe. Sorry, it was 2013 when it was open. And so that's been a very big area for a police accountability the ACLU has been involved in historically. And I think now one of the things that the ACLU does that is not necessarily directly police accountability, but is helping people who interact with the police is like the Know Your Rights training. So we go into communities, schools, and teach people like these are your rights when you stop with the police. Not legal advice, but we're just looking at like what does it say in the United States Constitution that are your rights that you can know what to do and not to do when you're stopped by the police. And I think people knowing their rights inherently is an act of police accountability.
Absolutely.
If you know your rights, citizens are able to hold them accountable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Whew. So we spoke a little bit, or you spoke a little bit about the importance of voting, but can you discuss the importance of protecting voters' rights on the ballot, not even just in Ohio, but why it's so important?
Yeah, it's important because, I mean, us voting is one of our like fundamental civil rights, you know, and it's a fundamental civil right because it can lead to us protecting other civil rights and so many other implications that it has. And there's definitely an attack on people's voting rights, and it has been for quite some time. And to just limit the power that people have when it comes to voting. We've seen, you know, just last year, there was a bill in our state house that was making it harder for people to vote, where it passed a voter ID law, and, you know, it has a shorter period for early voting. It has limited drop boxes to 1 per county. So, you know, in a place like Cuyahoga County, you have so many people, one drop box. And so it is really important because that is how we are able to choose people who represent us and choose people who make our lives, you know, make decisions for our lives that we don't necessarily have control over sometimes. That is our control, is like electing people and voting on issues. Or even like we see in November, as a woman, being able to vote on my reproductive rights is so important. And, you know, having the option to vote on that, I think is really important.
Okay. Well, thank you, Cyan, for joining us. Again, Cyan is in the Ohio office of the ACLU. This is Forum 360, where we have a global outlook from a local view. See you guys soon.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.